don't trial your dog if your dog's not ready. I see a lot of people, like, if you're second guessing yourself, and that's normal if you're competing. And this people around you should tell you too when you're not ready to trial, because I see a lot of people that go in and they're just hoping that the dog succeeds or hoping that they can just like pull through. If I'm gonna do a trial, I'm gonna make sure my dog's at 100% or at least as close as possible to get there. And if they're not, I'm okay with not competing. A lot of people throw their dogs in there too early and they know it's too early, but they just want to see if they can wing it. And then you end up creating a lot more problems with the dog if they fail in trials.
This that go and get it with no hesitation. This that never quit. Start that elevation. This that process. This that in the making.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Elevated Canine Podcast. And I am here with my co-host,
Roel Guerra.
And today we got my brother, Chris Sykes, who he might just become a regular face you see on this podcast. In my opinion, he has a lot to add, and so we might just bring him in for every single podcast if he has the time. But anyways, so we've been away for a little bit. As you guys can see, we have I don't know if you guys can see, we're not done yet, but it's a new spot. It's a new area where we're doing our podcast. We got a location here in the city of Upland, California, and this is our first one back. So thank you guys for joining us. Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
You doing great?
Yes, sir.
What's new? Anything new? You look nervous.
I just don't know what to talk about yet. I'm sure
well, we don't have nothing to talk about yet, but we'll get into it. Royal, how you been, bro?
Been well.
Anything new, Royal? What you got going on?
Nothing really. Just I'm glad finally we're in the new spot. Finally able to record another episode. I've been getting hit up by so many people. I've already watched all of your episodes 3 times. When the next one's coming out? Well, here it is. Today we're just gonna be bullshitting. Nothing really too specific.
Too formal, yeah.
You know, just have some fun today.
Yep. What's up with you, man? What dogs are you gonna be working with right now?
Just Q and Player P.
You know what? So Q is a Pitbull. How old is he?
He's about maybe a year and a half.
So Q is a year and a half, and Player is
almost 4. All
right. Now I'm gonna ask you this: what is the biggest difference when training a Pitbull compared to a malinois?
That's good. Pit bulls, I feel like, the main difference between the pit bulls, depending on the pit bull you get in malinois, is the malinois are a lot heavier on like prey drive, and pit bulls, I feel like you have to bring out the drive and build up the drive. I feel like it takes a lot longer to build that drive, depending on the dog you have. So if you have like a slower pit bull, you have to develop them the correct way, but the drive can still be there if you know how to access it. And versus like a malinois, they're like pretty much born with the prey drive and they're high at prey, so it's a lot easier to get the malinois to kind of like move and follow lures versus like getting a pit bull to stay interested in like an item or a toy that you have. And then it's different when you put a decoy in front of a pit bull because the drive is out of the roof when it comes to that.
So let me ask you this: if somebody out there is having trouble bringing out drive in their pit bull or their bully, what is one way that, because I have a few things that I would do differently. What are a few things that you would do differently to bring out some of that drive?
What I do is I tie out the dog. So I tie out and build frustration, but I don't just do it with the decoy. I also do it with like a ball. So I might frustrate him with the ball, get him super hyped up, go behind him like on the tie out, unleash him, and then build his drive towards the ball, and then grab the ball, and then maybe start doing his obedience with that.
So through a lot more like frustration.
Yeah, a lot more frustration.
I feel like the times that I've worked with dogs like that, I feel like if you bring a little bit more of a fight to it, that it brings a little more drive into it. For example, if I'm agitating a pit bull and I'm trying to get him to turn on, if I'm just like moving the rag around, they're not really into it. But if I like smack them with it on the side, on his shoulder or something, it brings out like a little bit more fight. And that kind of brings out the dog a little bit more. Is that something?
Oh yeah, that's huge. That's huge because if it's not a challenge, they just don't care to play. Which is why I think when it comes to a decoy being in front of them, it's like a lot more fire behind it because they believe it's an actual fight versus like a certain toy. So something that Jalen put me onto was like the Kong balls. So the Kong ball is like a lot harder to grip for the dogs. It's bigger, so it's like a mouthful for them versus like a regular ball or a regular tug. It was just no self-enjoyment in that until we like went to something that I personally thought was too big for him or too strong for his grip. Once it was more challenging for him, it just brought out so much drive. And then he was actually like willing to bite hard and like hold on.
So the frustration of not being able to created more drive in the dog.
Big time.
This is for Q.
Yeah, this is for Q.
Got it. What about you, Ro? You got a pit bull and you got a Roddy too now.
Yeah. So Leela was the first dog that I learned on.
Yeah.
And I'm learning with still. So, obviously if I could start over again, I would do things different. First, I mean, you saw her when she was at 4 months old.
Yeah.
And from 4 months till 11 months, you said no bite work, let's just do obedience. And then she had her second session at 11 months and she was still crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy for the bite. But with her, I haven't tried the Kong yet. That's something I'll try. But if there's a decoy in front of her, she doesn't really care for food and she doesn't really care for the toy at all. All she likes, like you said, is the fight.
She wants to fight. Yeah,
All
she
wants to
likes
do
to
is
bite.
fight, so.
I remember I saw her and I was like, yeah, she's definitely got it. And I could see the problem. I could see a problem coming to us if all we did was bite work. So I was like, yeah, we should probably not do so much with her.
Yeah, so.
But anyways, so that's the difference between, you feel, the Pitbull and the Malinois, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we didn't have really a subject to go on today, so I was like, I asked online, and I think we got a really good question or a subject that we could dive into. Chris, I think, what was the Canine Street League, was that your first trial, or is that
Yeah, that was my first trial.
Cool. We could go at this from a first-time trialing standpoint of view, and somebody who's done it more than a few times, like myself. Roel has gone into the trial field once as well. What was something that you felt like from day, because you trialed 2 days, right?
Yeah.
What was something that you felt was like part of your routine, or anything that you changed coming into trial, or something that messed you up that you felt like I should have never changed this going into trial, or do you think that you did everything correct the way you should have done it?
I felt pretty clean actually going into the trial. I was like super confident. It all just came together. But something I did change, which was pairing the first saver and the e-collar.
Right.
That was huge. Something you showed me. So just getting the dog to believe that the first saver is the e-collar helped me a lot. But even let's say before that, like even practicing for trial and prepping for trial, it's like making sure you fix every single mistake before you even step on the field. So It's the way the dog comes out of the car. It's the way you put the leash on the dog, how you're clipping the leash. If the dog's controlled from the very first movement, the dog has to be controlled, or the dog thinks he can just kind of basically do what he wants coming out. So for me, it was like structure from beginning to end, and then seeing mistakes in handling and not just the dog. So the way I position my body, the way I'm holding the leash, how the dog reacts to all of that, like from dropping the leash on the floor and having to pick the leash up to see where the dog's at, if he's staying in position or if he's dropping down with me, kind of like confused. So I think every little detail kind of mattered to me going into it.
Yeah, and I mean, it helped that you've been in Chris does, MMA fighting, and he's done, he's a professional fighter. He's done a couple fights, so he's been in that stage where people are watching. Do you think that helped you coming into that? Or?
Oh, yeah, big time. Yeah.
Right. I feel like, now looking back to the first times I trialed to now, I just feel like, well, first of all, I prepped differently. For my first times, the whole picture from my training to the trial field changed for my dog, meaning I didn't have the toy, I didn't have the food that I would normally have, I didn't have my cues that I would give with my mouth, like, or that type of stuff. I just didn't have that in the trial field. And then I remember my dog, just like, I don't know if it was, he could sense that things were just completely different. Well, things were completely different compared to how I trained. And so I had a complete different dog the day of the trial. That was with my Corso with Slater. This was back in, 2013 or something like that. Looking back at it now, now what I feel is that when I approach my training, I always have in the back of my head trial and how I'm gonna present the day of the trial. So I have a routine that I would probably do at my car before I even go into the field. Now, club trials compared to regionals or nationals, and I've only done one national. I've done more than a few regionals, but I've only done one national. But it's completely different, a club trial compared to a national trial. Those are two different things. And because at a national trial, well, first of all, there's probably going to be a lot more people. There's going to be a lot more waiting around. There's going to be a lot more maybe waiting at the start line, or and all that comes into play. And so depending on the sport that you're playing, you have to prep for that. if you're going to be traveling with your dog, you have to do that with your dog before you step into the trial field. Like, that is a important piece of the puzzle when it comes to trialing. If you are going to trial somewhere, like my first regional was in Arizona, and I thought I had it in the bag, you know, and I was like, this is going to be easy, I thought. Well, first of all, I didn't track enough to really, so my dog failed tracking. And then he got diarrhea for, I don't know what it was, but he got diarrhea, so he got sick. And we were just not used to it. We were just not used to trialing and traveling. And so that is another thing to the puzzle that you have to add before you're going to trial. You got to get into that. But most importantly, I would say you have to have rituals with your dog before stepping into your training field. Not trial field, your training field, because those same rituals are going to be used when you go into your trial, and you want to make sure that it is not so foreign to the dog.
Right. So you're referencing the moment from the dog comes out of your van, in between then and stepping onto the trial field, you have a ritual.
1,000%. I mean, even to how you break your dog to go potty before you go into the trial field. Like, some people will go break the dog and then put him in and then bring him out to train. And that's what they do all the time. But then in the trial, they'll probably bring the dog out like 5 times just because they're nervous.
Yeah.
And the dog's not used to that now. So now you threw something different at your dog, and that little piece could probably change the way that your dog is acting. Because sometimes in training, what we do is we'll bring the dog out for obedience, put him up, bring him out for protection. Yeah. So by the second or third time that you bring out your dog, he's like, hey, we're going to do some protection. And you could lose your dog there before you even start.
Do you think it's important to, like you said, like we'll run all the dogs through obedience, and then we'll run all the dogs through protection? During trial, is it always going to be that way? Or is there some points where it's obedience and then you put it away and then protection as well?
For, IGP, PSA, you're always going to have separate, protection and obedience. For ring sport, you want to make sure that you go in there and the dog gets somewhat used to the picture of I'm going to do some obedience and then I'm going to go into some bite work. Mm-hmm. You got to have that sort of picture for the dog, right? Because it's never going to happen where you do your obedience and you put them up and you bring them out for protection in trial for ring sports. Mm-hmm. For IGP, you're going to separate your obedience from your protection. And there's going to be certain cues you're going to give your dog before protection and before obedience. So those rituals, or before tracking as well, all those rituals, you got to think about them and make sure you're super consistent with them so that, again, your dog is not lost when you get into the trial field.
Yeah. I think something else that's important too is to, during trial, like this happened to Chris at Canine Street League, where a bunch of contestants got disqualified for something, and then his pre-trial routine, which is like 10 minutes long, maybe 5-10 minutes long.
What was this?
This is at Canine Street.
Oh, yeah.
Where he was, I don't know if maybe you lost track of time or you didn't realize that the time you had wasn't as much as you were expecting, but Chris still was like, all right, I'll bring him out now, but I'm still going to do my routine. So what would you say to other people who are going to trial? What if the time doesn't allow for your pre-trial routine?
I don't step out until I'm ready. It doesn't matter. If my dog's not ready, I'm not setting him up for failure. If I'm late, which they didn't come get me, I was waiting. But if I'm late on the field and my dog's not ready, I'm not going out there because I'm not going to miss a chance or take a chance and mess his full routine up and lose points and possibly not place just because I'm not ready. It's like, okay, if I get deducted already, then I'll eat that, but I'm going to make sure I can still go out there and perform well with him.
Yeah, I think it depends on the competition, right? Like if you're at a national competition and you're taking too long, I mean, they might even just X you out. And
but would you say that's better for your dog that you didn't set it up for failure because something changed, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure I would still do my trial prep. I'll do everything the way I have to do it. And if I don't do it and I get cut, it is what it is. But I mean, I definitely. But I think people they're just so in their head and they're so nervous themselves that they just forget everything of how they normally do things.
And that's what happened to me. I mean, I was just so scared. So scared. I almost pulled out. Like I was like, Oscar, I'm going to pull out. She's not acting right. Well, it's because I didn't even know it at the time, but you're right. I brought her out like 3 or 4 times, and she had no idea what was going on. It was 103 degrees that day. She felt the ground. after the third time, she was like, well, I'm not going to lay down on this.
Yep.
And everything just changed. Everything changes on trial day for sure.
Yep. Another thing for like for new people that are gonna trial for the first time, make sure that you train with a bunch of people, you know, around and do all that stuff, because sometimes your dog's not used to it, and it's a complete different picture when you go there. Another thing is, make sure that your dog is in the right state of mind before, because I mean, they might be looking all over the place and everything, and it starts bad and it just gets worse from there. It's not going to get better. So me personally, if I see that my dog is just not, like, for example, if I went into the trial field and my dog is just not there, he's looking for the decoy and I just can't get a hold of him, I'll probably just pull. I'll be like, why? Because the dogs are very smart and very fast. They learn, oh, this is the trial, this is not a trial. Oh, I can act like this here, I can't act like this here.
Yeah.
So that's why it is very important to make sure that your dog is in the right state of mind. You have those rituals together so you can feel comfortable and confident when you step into the trial field.
And when you have the opportunity, take them to where they have open fields for you to practice on the trial. That's a huge thing. Because I remember taking my dog to the field, his first trial, and he had no idea where he was. The same thing. He's like looking everywhere. He's interested in everything, and I felt like I had no control. So taking them to different places, and how you can do like the day before, you can take the dog and use that opportunity to train on the field was huge for me. For a dog that's not used to it, not every dog is going to be like that. You can take certain dogs out to new places and they might not care, but you got to think about it. There's going to be a big crowd there. There's people talking, cheering, whatever you want to say.
Yep.
It's a big distraction from a normal, just everybody's quiet on the field and you're just doing practice.
Yep. Another mistake that I see is that people will go into the trial field, you know, for like open field when it's not the trial, but they'll go, say, the day before trial, because sometimes they'll give you they call it open field, where you can go train on the grounds. So to get your dog used to it a little bit, right? And one of the mistakes that I see people doing is they go and instead of training, they act like it's a trial. And they take all the equipment off the dog. They do all that. And then now you just let the dog know, okay, you can get away with this here. You can get, you know, instead of using that opportunity to be able to, you know, let your dog know, like, hey, you can't do that here. You know, be able to correct your dog on there. You will literally take everything off your dog and go in there when it's not even a trial. So for me personally, when I do an open field, I do only a few things. I don't go through a whole routine. I just do things where I feel I want my dog to remember. So that could be maybe like the long bite, where the guy is coming out and he's going to be running towards him, and I'll work on a short one of that. You know what I'm saying? Of those, or I'll even have the helper run all the way to him, pay him, and I'll end it on that. Or running the blinds, like that's an important one, because, you know, maybe the distance could be longer. So I'll run blinds. He'll come into a barking hold. I'll pull him out, and that's all I do with them. I don't do the whole routine. And some people will do the whole routine with no equipment or anything in the open field. In my opinion, that's a big mistake. You know, I remember a guy that I was training with when I first started. He would even do at open field. He would use a bungee in open field because that's what the dog was used to. And the only time that he didn't use the bungee was the day of the trial. And, you know, and it worked. It worked. But if, say, he didn't use the bungee in open field and, you know, something would have happened where the dog got wigged out or something, that's it.
Right.
The next, I mean, you're done. You know, and some people will be like, well, I want to kind of see where my dog is at. That's the big thing. I want to see where my dog is at. I mean, you should see if your dog is having issues before you even step into the trial field. But anyways, that's my opinion.
So you'd rather the dog kind of discover that, oh, my e-collar's not on, or maybe you start losing him during the trial, versus you'd rather start losing him during the trial, if you are going to lose him, than lose him the day before the trial. Well,
I think that if you're losing him the day before the trial and you can correct him for it, he's going to remember that, and he's going to remember that field.
Got it. So he shouldn't be able to get away with whatever he wants to.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to use it as an opportunity of training.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
While you're there.
I think it's such a strong belief that they have it on that you can get away with it for sure.
Yeah, that is how I would approach trial. You're going to make mistakes, but I remember seeing my first trial compared to my last one. I think I mentioned it in the podcast before, and I was horrible. So experience is going to be your best teacher anyways. So in conclusion, Chris, you got anything to add, bro?
Don't trial your dog if your dog's not ready. I see a lot of people, like, if you're second guessing yourself, and that's normal if you're competing, but and this people around you should tell you too when you're not ready to trial, because I see a lot of people that go in and they're just hoping that the dog succeeds or hoping that they can just like pull through. My whole thing with, if I'm gonna do a trial, I'm gonna make sure my dog's at 100% or at least as close as possible to get there. And if they're not, I'm okay with not competing. A lot of people throw their dogs in there too early and they know it's too early, but they just want to see if they can wing it. And then you end up creating a lot more problems with the dog if they fail in trial. So if the dog gets ran by, let's say, just something weird happens, the dog hasn't seen it before, and you probably should have practiced on that a lot longer before trial came. If the dog sees it more than once or sees it on a trial field, he's going to remember that picture, and then you're going to have to deal with trying to fix that again.
1,000%. And
that's something that you might not be able to fix. It for sure affects the dog.
Yep. And you know what? I mean, we all have standards of what we want from our dog and the level of, some people just want to get the titles and they're happy with it, not having 100 points. That's cool. But don't be upset because of the work that you didn't put in, that you know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people, oh, my dog just did this. Well, no. Well, if you really sit back and look at why your dog did that, you're going to realize that, one, you probably didn't put in the right reps, or, two, you went too fast or something, and you skipped a couple steps, and they will come out in trial,
For sure.
But anyways, guys, again, this is our first one back. We're going to keep it sweet and short, and make sure you guys check out the following podcast. We're excited to get this going again, all right? Chris, anything you got to say?
Hopefully they have me back.
Yeah, we'll have Chris back.
We'll definitely have you back. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to follow us on Elevated Canine Media. Then Oscar Mora
Canines. Chris, what's your handle?
Chris Sykes.
And then mine's ECA Roel G on Instagram.
And remember, guys, elevate your mind.
Elevate your canines.
Let's go.
Let's get it. This that go and get it. With no hesitation. This that never quit. Start that elevation. This that process.